The wind feels like October, sharp with the smell of dried leaves and chimney smoke. I stand on the cracked front steps of a house whose bones I know better than my own. The key is cool in my palm. On the lawn, the maple tree throws orange light across the grass like spilt honey. A moving truck hums an idle. A man in a neon vest glances at me as if I'm fragile china. I smile back, a careful thing that won't break on the air. Inside the house, my house, the echoes are already changing. Walls remember pockets of laughter and the percussion of anger. They remember footsteps that were once small, then too heavy, then so light I worried they would float away forever. The floor near the kitchen dips where my husband always stood to hang his coat. The banister is smooth from years of hands. These are the places the heart learns to live. My name is Evelyn May Carter. I am 74 years old, American-born and raised in a town where the whistle of the mill was a church bell and everybody knew whose roses bloomed and whose husband didn't come home. My son says I am old. My son mocked me for the way I forget the names of YouTube stars and all those apps. He says I am slow. He said I wasn't. His wife said I wasn't family. So I made her homeless. That's the sentence everyone wants. The bite, the story's hot coal. You want to know about revenge. But revenge is never the meal you think it is. It is something you gulp in the dark and realize later you've swallowed glass. The moving man coughs polite. Ma'am, he says, are we starting with the bedroom or the kitchen? I run my fingers over the little groove at the doorframe where, once upon a life, I marked the height of a boy with blonde hair. Start where all love begins, I tell him. Start with the kitchen. The first thing anybody ever taught me about love was that it's work. My mother's hands showed me. She came home with threads of cotton stuck to her wrists, the scent of the mill clinging to her like a second skin. She rattled off the price of beans and the exact measure for cornbread, as if they were prayers, and maybe they were because they kept us alive. We lived in a shotgun house with a tin roof that chimed in the rain. When thunder rolled, I counted seconds and learned patience. When the roof leaked, I put out pots, then learned resourcefulness. When the neighbors fought, I learned to hum long and low over the noise until it quieted me. And when my father died, clean and sudden, the way a car takes a deer and doesn't look back, I learned the biggest lesson. Sometimes love is just showing up every morning with your hands ready. I wanted to be a nurse once. I liked the small coverings of care, a hand to hold, a cool cloth to forehead, the confidence of knowing where the pulse lived. I wanted the white shoes, the clean snap sound of a glove. But life had a way of predetermining shift schedules. My little brother came down with asthma, then pneumonia. College brochures gathered dust. I learned the recipe for keeping people upright when the world wanted them to kneel. I was 20 when I met Walter. He had the kind of smile that made strangers tell him secrets. It's a dangerous sort of smile. It carries a promise it can't always keep. We married in a church with peeling paint and bright windows that made everything look cleaner than it was. He worked at the mill, too, and I worked mornings at Dot's Diner. We saved coins in a jar labeled someday in crooked blue letters. When I found out I was pregnant, we went walking by the river to celebrate and saw a great blue heron standing perfectly still, poised and patient, a spear in the shallow water. I told Walter that was how I wanted to love. Patient, tall, quiet when needed and fierce when I had to be. The boy that came to us, laughing and wet and loud, we named Daniel. He had fists that refused to open, and eyes that searched the corners of the room for the future. You can get tired from happiness just as you can get tired from sorrow. The first year with him felt like we were rushing across stepping stones in the river, lifting our feet fast so we didn't get too cold. Walter would kiss the top of my head when he came home, and sometimes he would stand by the window as if something was out there he needed to see. He said it was the sky. He said it was hope. I said it looked like more work. We were young. We were in love. And then one night the mill coughed sparks like a sick animal. A pipe burst. A man lost his hand. Walter came home with black on his face and something broken behind his eyes. He tightened. I learned. Then what grief does to some men, it turns their heart into a fist they cannot relax. He started going out on Saturday nights. I started counting. The jar labeled someday clinked less and less. The baby cried, I sang. The blue heron was a painting on a calendar. I would touch its feathers on paper and think, wait, be still. Strike when the moment matters. The winter Daniel turned 5, the mill took Walter. People said it was an accident. People said it was preventable. People said a lot of things to fill the quiet after a coffin is lowered. Things to warm themselves up. I learned there is no good temperature at a graveside. It is a strange thing to be both young and completely old all at once. I walked home from the funeral and made biscuits. I don't know why. Grief made me hungry for ordinary things. The butter was cold. The flour was soft. My hands did what they knew. It's how I made it through most of my life. I did what my hands knew. When a boy loses a father, he goes looking for the part of himself his father would have held. Daniel searched in wide circles. He was angry, then he wasn't, then he was. He learned how to tie his shoes too late and how to lie too soon. He stood on chairs when I asked him not to and wouldn't look at me when I asked him why. He liked Batman, peanut butter, and any game where he got to win at the end. I loved him with everything I owned. I loved him until I had nothing left. Then I borrowed love against my future and loved him with that, too. I took a job at the school cafeteria, then night stocking shelves. I learned which canned soup was cheapest per ounce and how to stretch ground beef across 3 meals without anybody feeling cheated. I learned to smile at the checkout line when I had to put something back. I learned that people fell in love with you if you remembered their birthdays. So I remembered birthdays. I remembered teachers' favorite pies. I remembered the names of the neighbors' cats. I remembered everything except myself. And I fought for him. There were boys who got nicer bikes. There were boys who got invited to lake houses. There were boys who had brand new sneakers and never scuffed them on purpose to seem tough. Daniel was not those boys. I saved for his baseball glove. I saved for braces. I saved for that backpack he wanted with the little port for headphones. I saved for everything except someday. One day when he was 12, we sat on the porch and the sun slid down like a yoke across the evening. He looked old suddenly. He looked at me like I was somebody's mother and not his. He said, "Mom, I won't be like Dad." I looked at his bitten nails. I looked at the way his knee twitched when he lied. "Promise you'll be like yourself," I said. "Promise you'll be kind." Later, when he was the kind of man who learned how to hurt with words, I thought about that night and wondered if I had made a mistake. You cannot give someone a compass and expect them not to walk to the edges of maps. He graduated high school by the skin of effort and bone of stubbornness. He stood up there in a borrowed tie and smiled like relief was a virtue. I held my breath for him. I held it all night, I think, and then I held it for the summer while he decided who he wanted to be and what he wanted to want. A guidance counselor said community college, make your first run small. I said if he wants it, he can have more. We visited a state school 2 towns over, where the library was taller than a church steeple and the grass looked like it got combed every morning. He stopped by a bench and said, "How much?" The way a person says, "How much?" can tell you a lot about their life. He said it like a dare. I said it like a prayer. I sold the bracelet my mother gave me when I married Walter. I sold the ring he gave me in return. I sold my wedding china. I sold the someday jar first, though it was mostly quarters and hope by then. I co-signed a loan he said he'd pay off and believed him because he believed him. And off he went with a duffel bag full of brand new notebooks, promising he'd call on Sundays. He called the first Sunday. He called the second. Then he called when he needed money. Do you ever notice that when people say I'm fine, they mean I am actively not fine? But I do not want to put that on you. He said I'm fine in new ways each month. I'm fine became this professor is a hater. I'm fine became everybody cheats. I'm fine became I hate it here. Then I drove there and brought him home. He worked at a warehouse. He drifted into a job selling warranties on appliances. He said he had a knack for convincing people to buy things. I paid his car insurance. I paid after he backed into a pole and cracked the bumper. I paid the late fees for the student loans because hearing the word default made my blood get cold. And then he met a woman named Vanessa. Vanessa had hair that fell all the way down her back, like a curtain you'd want to stand behind, and guess at what was coming next. She had a sharp mouth and softer eyes, and in the beginning, this laugh that made me want to give her all the chocolate chips in the house. She dressed the way women do when they grew up without much and decided the world would never again see them plain. Heels that clicked like punctuation. Nails that tapped the table and made the room believe it was listening to something important. I wanted to love her. I wanted to be the mother-in-law who learned the recipe right and never complained about the wedding dress and always kept mints in her purse for nervous bridesmaids. When she looked at Daniel and saw "Fix Me" tattooed across his forehead, I didn't see it yet. I saw the way his shoulders went down when she touched him, the way he seemed younger and older all at once. They moved fast, riding the kind of momentum that happens when two lonely people mistake need for wonder. One day we were having coffee and pie, and the next there was a ring and a date and a list of things they couldn't afford but intended to buy. "Mom," he said, "can we have the reception in the backyard?" He said it as if a backyard was something that could be borrowed like a sweater. "Yes," I said, because the yard had held his first steps and my first grief, and why not let it hold a beginning, too? We strung fairy lights that were cheaper than they looked. We borrowed chairs from the church. In the afternoon, the sky threatened rain and then decided better of it, so the air felt like holding your breath and hoping. Vanessa walked down the aisle made with rose petals from Aldi, and my heart did that thing where it rips and stitches at the same time. She hugged me after vows and whispered, "Thank you," as if the word might cost her. "Welcome to the family," I said, and meant it. The first time she came in the house and ran her fingers along the mantel, she left streaks and said, "Dust everywhere." I laughed then. 2 weeks later, when she made a face about my couch, I laughed again. 6 months later, when she said in front of friends, "This house is like vintage, but not the cute kind," I put my hands in my apron and pressed my fingertips into my palms, so I wouldn't say something I couldn't take back. They lived in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like other people's dinners. When their lease ended, the rent went up. He called. He was good at calling when something went up. "Mom," he said, is it okay if we move there for a little while? Just to save." I had bought my house free and clear by then, in the slow, honest way that takes a lifetime and is more precious because of it. I had paid off the roof repair and the new furnace and the time the pipe burst under the sink. The deed had my name on it in clean letters. I slept best when I touched that paper tucked in the bottom of my box where precious things go. They moved in. They painted the guest room a shade of gray that had a fancy name. They bought a rug that looked like something out of a magazine. Vanessa brought her rules with her. No shoes on the carpet. No scents that weren't a candle from a store with a French name. The kitchen needed new knives. The plates were dated. The couch, again, not the cute kind of vintage. I went quiet because there are wars you can win and homes you must keep holy. I shared my refrigerator, my laundry detergent, my morning quiet. I shared the bathroom mirror and the porch swing and the last good piece of cake. I shared my son and pretended I didn't notice the way he didn't look back when he closed doors. The day that mattered, the day revenge began to grow in me like a bruise, started with a cake. It was my birthday. Vanessa made an announcement in her bright, tidy way. No sugar in the house because they were doing something called a cleanse. She made a salad with blueberries and called it cake. There were candles but no frosting, which feels like a sin. After dinner, Daniel poured himself a neat bourbon and laughed about a video on his phone where old people tried to mime. "You'd be hopeless, Mom," he said, not looking up. "You still type like this." He made little peck-peck motions with his fingers. "Leave her alone," I think he expected Vanessa to say. Instead, she watched me and smiled with that small mouth. "It's okay," she said. "She's, what, 70? Internet is not for everyone. My mom is useless with it. It's a cute old people thing." I felt myself look down at my hands. I knew every scar on them, every burn from a pan and slip of a blade. I had saved him with these hands. I had paid for braces. I had kept the lights on. I had held his hair back when he was sick and signed things under the hum of fluorescent lights that scared me. These hands had earned roofs. I looked at them and wondered who would hold them as the years went on. Mom, he said, tapping the table, maybe it's time we think about assisted living options. It would be safer. You forget stuff. I stared at him so long the ice in his glass melted and knocked against the side like a heartbeat. You mean, I said carefully, you mean I move out of my house? Vanessa toyed with her napkin. It's just we need space. For the baby when we have one. And, like boundaries. Right? My heart dropped to floor I didn't know was under the house. You want me to go, I said. From my house. She tilted her head. The way people do when they're trying to decide how honest to be. Well, she said. And then the sentence that would push the first domino. You're not, not really family. Silence chose violence. It stretched thin and tight. Dana must have felt something. He laughed too loud. She didn't mean it like that, Mom. It's just things change. I do not know if you have ever watched somebody hold a knife by the blade because they picked it up the wrong way. The face they make, the little shock at their own blood. That is what his face looked like when he realized how he had sounded. But it came late. The knife had already cut. I stood. The room swayed. I put my hand on the table like sailors do on the deck when the sea decides to be a bully. I breathed. I see, I said. I see how it is. Vanessa looked relieved. It surprised me. People tell you who they are when you give them a sharp enough corner. I went to my room that shared a wall with the room I had painted myself when I was 25. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to them laugh in the kitchen. I thought about the bar of light that always fell under my door in the morning, and how it always felt like a promise. That night, the light was thin and mean, and something turned inside me. Not a hard thing, not a knife. Something clean and cold. Not rage, not even sadness. Precision. Love, I have learned, is not just about giving things. It is about knowing when to take things back. The next morning I drove to the bank. The woman behind the desk had a cardigan the color of oatmeal and a smile that said she had a drawer full of tissues for when people cried. I put the deed on her desk like a card in a game I had finally learned the rules to. How can I help you, Miss Carter? She asked. I need to protect what I built, I said. I need to put this house where it can't be used against me. She nodded the way women do when their eyes say more than their mouths. We talked about a trust, a will, the kind of papers that make a person present even when they are gone. We talked about options. We talked about stairs and handrails and a thing called a life estate. The words made me feel like I had an army I could put on paper. Later, I visited a lawyer with a tie that had tiny sailboats on it and a firm handshake. He asked me what I wanted to do. I want to make sure nobody throws me out of my home, I said. And I want to make sure when I decide that home can be used for something good. Like what? He asked. Like safety, I said. Like a haven. He pursed his lips and nodded. He had seen a lot of families tear themselves apart over things like couches and decks. He had likely seen sons who grew up and forgot who paid for their braces. He drew up papers. I signed. I went home with my manila envelope of power and sat at the kitchen table while Vanessa unpacked a box labeled decor and took out a sign that said gather in cursive. I looked at the word. I had gathered. I had gathered joy. I had gathered pain. I had gathered years in this place like eggs from stubborn hens. Daniel came in, kissed me on the cheek, like I was a coat rack he used out of habit. What's that? He asked, nodding at my folder. My business, I said pleasantly. Then I made a pot of soup in the big white pot that knows the taste of all my days. When the first real cold snapped the air tight, Vanessa's pregnancy test turned pink. There was an excited hush that fell across the house for a few days. I knitted faster. I'm old-fashioned in that way. I measure love in stitches when I'm nervous. Daniel told me they were thinking about names. He laughed when I suggested mine. No offense, Mom, but Evelyn is like a piano, he said. It's heavy. The days smoothed into routine. I took my walks. I baked. I listened to the house squeak and settle and kept my thoughts folded like linens. But I watched. The way he looked rougher. The way she got sharp sometimes when the check didn't stretch. The way they started whispering in the evenings. And then one night when the moon looked like a pearl the world had lost and found again, Vanessa stood in the doorway of the living room with her palm propped under her belly and said, we need money. We need to renovate. The baby needs a proper nursery. The baby needs love, I said. Everything else is a table to put it on. She rolled her eyes. We thought, she said, we thought you might be willing to put the house up as collateral for a loan. The laugh that came out of me sounded like a cough that turned into a bark. No, I said. And then, because some lessons need to be as plain as biscuits, this house is not your piggy bank. She smiled without teeth. Then maybe we should talk about timelines, Evelyn. About when you can find a senior place. We stared at each other across the shaggy rug she loved. You said I wasn't family, I reminded her softly. She didn't flinch. People who live in mirrors learn to ignore reflections. That was out of context. Context is everything, I said. The day the baby arrived, the world got quiet. It's not that the noise stopped. It's that the noise changed. A granddaughter, pink and furious and perfect. They named her Olivia. I held her, and my heart remembered how to be an instrument. I wish I could tell you that the baby fixed things. Babies fix nothing. Babies take broken things and make them tender and important and loud. That matters, but it doesn't fix. When Olivia was 3 months old, I came home from the grocery store with a bag of apples and found my bedroom door locked. It had never been locked in the 47 years I'd had a bedroom in this house. Daniel, I called. Vanessa, why's my door? He came out of the nursery, half a onesie in his hands. He didn't meet my eyes. We had to move some things, he said. We needed storage. In my room, I said. Your room, Vanessa said brightly, coming down the hall, is more of a multi-use space now. We're a family. We share. You said I'm not family, I said. She laughed. Don't be dramatic. Give me my key, I said, holding out my hand. My voice didn't tremble. I was proud of it. You can be proud and grieving at the same time. People think those things are mutually exclusive. They aren't. She blinked. We changed the lock. Baby-proofing. Daniel shifted. Mom, don't make it a thing. I looked at him, the way he was already learning his wife's weather and standing in the rain without asking why. I put the apples down on the hall table and felt, for the first time in my life, that my home had become a place where I was a guest who had stayed too long. Precision, I reminded myself. Not rage. Precision. That night, while they slept, I opened my manila envelope and read my own name until it felt like armor. In the morning, I made coffee and called the lawyer. The courtroom had beige walls and a clock stuck 5 minutes fast. The judge wore tired kindness like an old sweater. My lawyer sat next to me, her suit sharp enough to cut paper. Across the aisle, Daniel fidgeted. Vanessa wore black, as if she was going to a fashionable funeral. This is the part of the story some people will judge me for. That is their right. I will tell you what I did. You can make your own weather. We brought house records. We brought the fact that I held the deed. We brought instances of mistreatment that I had documented in the quiet of late nights when nursing my own pain with a pen was the only medicine I had. We brought a request. I wanted them out. I wanted to reclaim my home. Not later. Not after the next flight. Now. Vanessa's lawyer argued that there was an implied arrangement, that they had invested time and money in improvements. He used the word elderly in a way that felt like a weapon. He tried to make me small. My lawyer stood up and did not make me anything. She just let me be what I already was, a woman who had worked and paid and loved and was not going to be pushed out of the house she bought because somebody younger wanted a nursery with a chandelier. The judge looked tired. He looked at Olivia, who slept in her car seat with her mouth open like a question. He rubbed his forehead. He asked Daniel if he wanted to speak. My son stood up, and in that moment I thought of the boy who had touched a heron's feather with one finger. He put his hands in his pockets and took them out again. I need to take care of my family, he said. The judge nodded. So, does she, he said, glancing at me. Then he made the decision. They had to leave. There would be a grace period. There would be papers and signatures and a timeline. But the house was mine again in a way more real than the deed had ever made it. In the parking lot, after, Daniel came up to me and looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, he said. Mom, where are we supposed to go? I wanted to take his face in my hands. I wanted to kneel like I used to and wipe his nose and tell him we'd make a tent in the living room with sheets and laugh under it until the truth didn't matter. But the truth always matters in the morning. You mocked me for being old, I said. Not cruel, just plain. You let her tell me I wasn't family. You locked my door. He flinched. I didn't lock it, he said reflexively. It was the kind of lie men tell when they are trying to locate their own shame and failing. We will be okay, Vanessa snapped, slipping her sunglasses on. We always are. Are you? I asked softly. She didn't answer. This is the place where the story gets its cruel headline. I could have stopped there. I could have let the eviction be the end. But there are days when pain asks for a sharper pencil. In the weeks that followed, while they scrambled, I did not soften. They asked for more time. I said no. They asked to store their things in the garage. I said no. They asked for a loan. I said no. They left in late afternoon on a Friday, the kind of sky that looks like it might do anything and then decides not to do a thing. Vanessa carried Olivia like a glass bowl. Daniel slammed the car door too hard and then opened it to make sure he hadn't woken the baby. They drove away without looking back. People don't look back when the house behind them is a mirror. That night, I slept in every room. I lay down on the carpets, on the floorboards, on the kitchen rug. I listened to the house breathe. I cried. I talked to Walter. You'd have hated me, I said. The next morning, I called the women at the shelter down on Maple, the one with the beds that fill up fast when the weather breaks bad. I told them I wanted to give the house to them after I died. I told them I had to stay until I was ready to leave this earth. But I wanted to make sure the walls I had worked so hard to hold up would shelter somebody when I wasn't there to watch. We can name a room after you, the director said. Name it after every grandmother who didn't get to be one, I said. Why, she asked. Because sometimes the safest place isn't with blood, I said. Sometimes it's with promise. I did not know what would happen to Vanessa and Daniel. I imagined couches. I imagined a one-bedroom with a window that looked onto a brick wall. I imagined them learning to be careful with things. I imagined Olivia, the purest unbroken thing among us, sleeping through it all as babies do, trusting the world to be soft. People like to think that consequences and endings are the same thing. They are not. Consequences are the middle. They are the weight you must carry to get to the next door. Endings are a kind of mercy. We don't often get the mercies we want. We get the ones we earn or the ones somebody else loans us. I saw Daniel once in the grocery store a few months later. He had lost weight. He looked like he'd learned what keeping quiet feels like. He caught sight of me near the oranges and stopped, as if invisible tape had been stretched across the aisle between us. Mom, he said. I nodded. Do you need money? I asked, because habits do not die. They retire, and then they come back for seasonal work. He shook his head. No, he looked at his hands the way I have looked at mine. I got a second job. Nights at the warehouse again. And Vanessa? I asked. He chewed the inside of his cheek. A boy again, not yet a man. She's not happy, but she's trying. And Olivia? He smiled, and there he was, my boy. She grabs my finger like it's the sun, he said. She laughs when I make the popping sound with my cheek. She sleeps like a bag of flour. We stood in the oranges. The world kept going. A woman asked a clerk where the almond milk was. A little boy threw a cereal box on the floor, and his mother picked it up and said his name like a song. I looked at my son and felt 10,000 things all at once, which is another way of saying I felt nothing at all that I could talk about. I want to see her, I said. When you can. He nodded. Hope is a dangerous pet. It needs feeding and sometimes it bites. But I gave it a piece of me anyway. Weeks passed. He texted pictures. A gummy smile, a hat with bare ears, 2 mismatched socks. We didn't talk about the house. We talked about teething. We talked about the weather. We talked and it was something. Then, in the middle of a Wednesday so ordinary it felt like a spare part, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Vanessa stood on the porch in a coat too thin for the wind, her hair blown to one side. She wasn't wearing the kind of lipstick that makes a person look like a promise. She looked like a person. Are you going to slam it in my face? She asked. Her voice sounded more like a question than anything else she'd ever said to me. No, I said. Come in. She stepped over the threshold like a cat entering someone else's kitchen. She held herself tight. as if her ribs were trying to keep her heart from falling out. He doesn't know I'm here, she said. He's at work. Tea? I asked. She nodded. In the kitchen, I set out the nice cups because sometimes ceremony heals. We sat. The steam fogged the air between us until it felt forgiving. I told myself, she said, staring at a speck on the table, that I was saving him, that I was making him better, that you were stuck. I am old, I said. I can be both old and useful. These ideas are not enemies. Her mouth quirked. You are. She took a deep breath. We've been in a motel. Off the highway. Olivia likes the pattern on the bedspread. She tries to catch the flowers. I think about you here with the quilts and the stove that has that chip in it and that weird sound the ice maker makes at night. It sounds like a frog, I said. We smiled at the same joke, finally. I came to say, she said, and her voice broke, I came to say I'm sorry. I said you weren't family, because I was afraid you were more family than me. You're the kind of woman men belong to. Not in a bad way. In a gravity way. You make a center. I didn't have a center. She swiped at her face. I hated that you didn't need me. I thought of all the ways I had needed her, to be kind, to be gentle, to be the patient I could hand my son to and know he was safe. We are all so bad at needing each other the right way, I said. I've been applying to jobs, she said. I have an interview at a receptionist's desk. It's nothing. Everything is something, I said. She nodded. I want to do right by my daughter. You just did something right, I said. You came here without armor. She laughed just a little. She sleeps on her side, she said, because small details are what keep people from drowning. We sat. The house listened. The wind adjusted. The frog ice maker cleared its throat. After a while, I stood and went to the closet and brought back a big blue plastic bin. Baby things, I said. Blankets. A mobile. The one with the stars. The motor breaks sometimes. If you hit it on the side, just so it keeps going. She took the bin. She pressed her lips together. She looked around the kitchen like she was committing it to memory, as if she would need to recite it later. The chip in the stove, the glass jar with sugar, the magnet shaped like a corn cob on the fridge. Thank you, she said. Take care of her, I said. I will, she said. She got up, walked to the door, then turned. Did you, she swallowed. Did you mean to make me homeless? I could have said so many things. I could have claimed a plan, a chessboard victory. I could have claimed morality, necessity, a lesson. Instead, I told the truth. I meant to protect myself. The rest happened. She nodded, as if that was the only answer she could respect. She left. The door clicked soft. I stood in the kitchen alone and put my hands flat on the table and breathed. Time went on. It does that, rudely or kindly, depending on what you need. I watched the maple tree do its great seasonal performance. Green, then gold, then empty, then tight with buds. I went to the shelter sometimes and brought casseroles and listened to women talk about men who had parentheses for hands, always leaving, always returning to ask a question that never changes. Why do you come here? A volunteer asked. Because when I was a young woman, I needed a place like this and didn't have one, I said. Because my house will be this place someday and I wanted to learn how to listen. I saw Olivia in snatches. The park, a library story time, her hand on my finger in the bread aisle. Daniel hovered, tentative, then sometimes bold, then ashamed again. He was learning how to be a father from scratch. He was teaching himself gentleness. He brought me a bouquet of daisies once. For the yard, he said, even though it was a vase bouquet and not meant for the dirt. We laughed and put it on the kitchen table beside the frog ice maker. He told me he was in a program to learn electrical work. Something to do, he said, shrugging, like it was a little thing to remake your life. Good, I said. Work. Make things run. The day he fixed the flicker in my bathroom light, he looked proud in a way that did not depend on anybody else's gaze. He stood on the little ladder and grinned down at me. See, he said. Useful. Very, I said. We didn't need to name the old ache. Vanessa texted me pictures of Olivia, sometimes. She didn't overdo it. She met me at the bus stop once and handed me a coffee. Cheap kind, she said. But hot. You look tired, I said. She laughed. That's my face now. She paused. I won't ask you to forgive me. I'll try to be someone you don't need to forgive. Try to be someone Olivia doesn't need to forgive, I said gently. The rest will sort itself out. She nodded. I saw the way she held the stroller with one hand, like it might roll away if she let it. I wanted to tell her how the fear never leaves. It only changes costumes. I didn't. Some lessons are learned by walking with blisters. When Olivia turned 1, we had a little party at the park. A cake with roses so pink they looked fake. I brought paper plates. Vanessa brought her parents, who came equipped with plastic bags and opinions. Daniel brought a kite. He tried to get it to fly, ran, and finally it lifted, this bright diamond tugging the string, asking for a little more. Olivia grabbed a fistful of frosting and smeared it on her own cheek. We all laughed. I looked around at these people and thought, this is a family. Messy, sad sometimes, mean sometimes, lovely often. We are not what we thought we'd be. We are what we are. I could feel Walter somewhere in that moment, as if he had stepped around the big maple to watch. I thought of the heron. I thought of patience and striking only when necessary. I thought, have I done right?